Welcome to our program this afternoon, Chicago's Mayors and the City Council, Intersecting Archives, New Collections, and Guides. I'm Ellen Keith. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicago Collections Consortium. We're going to start with our land acknowledgement. Chicago Collections Consortium acknowledges and is grateful for the Native peoples who laid the foundation for the city of Chicago, for the diverse Indigenous nations that reside in Chicago today. When you visit our member organizations and when you experience Chicago's outdoor spaces, we invite you to join in offering respect and gratitude to the many Indigenous peoples that reside in the Chicagoland region, as well as their ancestors. Explore is our flagship initiative. It's our portal. We welcome you to check out what's in Explore. A lot of wonderful collections from our members. Check out our events that are coming up. Our annual meeting is next month with 77 Flavors of Chicago, Dario Durham and Sarah Fata, the podcast hosts. And we could not do what we do without our generous supporters. So we give thanks to them as well. And to our speakers today, Dan Harper, Special Collections Assistant Archivist, University of Illinois, Chicago, Matt Messbarger, Archival Specialist, Office of the City Clerk, Murag Walsh, Senior Archival Specialist, Chicago Public Library, all who are CCC members. We've got a lot of social media going on, so share us with your friends, and sign up for our newsletter and check us out on Blue Sky, Facebook, and Instagram. And I really have to acknowledge our co-sponsor, Chicago Area Archivist, Gretchen Neidhart, is from their programming subcommittee, is so generous about co-sponsoring programs with us and giving us their support. I am now going to turn this over to Matt Messbarger from the City Clerk's office. And you'll be hearing audio, which I will toggle through very inelegantly. So just be prepared for that.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Matt Messbarger, Archival Specialist for the Office of the City Clerk. I wanted to thank Ellen and the Chicago Collections Consortium, as well as Gretchen and Chicago Area Archivists for co-sponsoring this webinar today to talk about the new City Council Archive meeting recording collection, as well as other related collections. So in 2024, the Office of the City Clerk was awarded a Recordings at Risk grant by the Council on Library and Information Resources to have digitized our collection of audio recordings of City Council meetings made between 1970 and 2012. The recordings, spanning just over 40 years of Chicago history, offer researchers an incredible primary source tool for exploring several pivotal eras of Chicago political history. Many Chicago firsts are captured by these recordings. The first women alders, including the first African-American woman alder, Anna Langford, in 1971, the first woman mayor, Jane Byrne, in 1979, the first Black mayor, Harold Washington, in 1983, the rise of Black political power in Chicago and the subsequent Council Wars backlash are included in these recordings, as well as the progress through the years towards civil rights for LGBT Chicagoans, as one example of what you can find in these recordings. There are explosive fights, memorial services, visits from astronauts and Chicago sports legends, former prime ministers and vice presidents, all captured on tape and now downloadable MP3. So far this year, the Office of the City Clerk has done a few outreach events related to this collection, but for this one, we wanted to show how the audio recordings collection invites researchers to explore topics of interest that can be enhanced by many of the archival collections available at institutions around the city, including today's participants, Chicago Public Library and UIC, and who are also Chicago Collections Consortium members. If you find something interesting in recordings from the Richard J. Daley machine era, you should check out the Richard J. Daley archives at UIC, or the available papers of aldermen who served at the same time, such as the Leon Dupre papers at the Chicago History Museum. Likewise, if you find something you want to explore further in the recordings of the Harold Washington era, there are tons of archival resources at Chicago Public Library and elsewhere related to Harold Washington's administration and his times. In this sense, though there may not be a central municipal archives for the city of Chicago, as we often lament, these records exist and in many cases are accessible. with newly digitized collections and resources from the city clerk's office, as well as a new subject guide for finding Chicago's municipal records hosted on the Chicago Collections Consortium site. Those of us who are custodians of these collections are increasingly working together to promote our intersecting collections as Chicago's municipal archives. So for this event, we present 3 audio clips from different mayoral eras represented by the recordings, and we'll hear from the archivists who represent the mayoral archives of the mayors in question at both Chicago Public Library and UIC to comment on what correlates in their collections to what we're going to hear in these pretty spicy clips, if I may say so.
Thank you, Matt. We have been joined by Clerk Anna Valencia, so we would love to hear some remarks from you, and we thank you so much for being a CCC member.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Ellen, and the Chicago Collections Consortium for spreading the word about our audio archives project and the excitement around this, which I did not know there would be so much excitement and interest, but there really has been. I want to thank Matt Messbarger, who's on the call here, who's the city's archivist and works within the Office of City Clerk. And Matt was able to actually find a grant to bring this project to life. And it's been really exciting to see it unfold. So I know you're going to hear some of the audio recordings. We've been taking this actually show on the road, and we did a really cool conversation in February and touched upon a little bit of the audio archives in terms of Harold Washington days, around the parking meter deal, the many different things you'll remember and maybe not. And then in April, we also were able to bring some of this to life for Women's History Month with Mayor Lightfoot and hear from some of the first pioneer women on the council, like City Councilwoman Anna Langford and Dorothy Tillman, who had some fiery words for some of their colleagues during that time that made me feel like, wow, we owe a lot for them showing us the way of what it looks like to lead with courage, especially as a woman elected. So I just wanted to thank everyone for making this possible, for this raw history to actually be heard in a time that we're living in right now, where we are fighting at the national level to preserve history, to preserve data, to be able to pass this down to other generations, to know our history so we know how far we have come and how far we still have to go in terms of our city council and everything that we hope to do in the future. So again, just want to thank you all for allowing us to share, and thank you for sharing this out with the world. You have been a great partner to share this with so many others, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Clerk Valencia. I attended the February and the April programs. They were awesome, and they fired me up for this. I am thrilled.
Well, stay tuned. We're going to do one in June too, so we'll make sure that we reach out to you when we have the ones in June ready.
I'm there. Excellent. We're going to start with UIC. And here's where I'm going to be really awkward. So we're going to listen to a clip from the Richard J. Daley era. You can see the excerpt from the City Council meeting held April 6th. There's a link to the full recording. And I will add, this program is being recorded. This is only like my 3rd or 4th one, so I'm not doing everything in order. This program will be recorded and sent out to you. The slides will be shared as well. You should be able to click on the links. So the speakers at this were Alderman William Singer, 43rd Ward, Alderman Claude Holman, 4th Ward, Leanne Dupre, 5th Ward, and Mayor Richard J. Daley. Let me bounce around and go to the clip itself.
Mr. President, that the journal was just a reflection of what happened. Well, if that's true, we could say that there was the approval of the mayor's appointment of a certain person as commissioner of the Park District, and that there was the approval of a certain person as member of the Environmental Control Appeal Board, and there was the recommendation of a certain house as a landmark. Well, what nonsense that would be. You wouldn't know what house, you wouldn't know what person, you wouldn't know anything. The truth, Alderman Holman, is that you only want people to know certain things and not the things that are embarrassing to you. You don't want the truth to come out. And there is an old statement, Alderman Holman, the truth shall make ye free. And that's what this debate is all about.
Chair, recognize Alderman Holman. In 1934, a black man named Arthur W. Mitchell was elected to Congress, the first one ever elected from the Democratic Party. I had the pleasure of serving as his private secretary for 3 years. That was at the session beginning in 1935, 36, and 37. Long, bright voice singer was born. All right, well, I'll take the bright boy back, dumb boy singer then. What is your point of order?
The point of order is that, in all decency, the mayor should chastise Alderman Holman for insulting a fellow member of the city council, and do so immediately, or it means that you're sanctioning insults of the members of the city council.
Take it easy, Leon. Don't get yourself excited. Don't get a stroke out, Leon. The point of order is not well taken. So don't take it easy now. Don't get too dramatic. There isn't enough cameras going. Where do they bring the rest of them? Where do they bring the rest of them? Don't get.
Stand there and degrade the city council. You've done enough to degrade the city council. By Alderman Holman.
Now, you're not going to rub the city council depraved. In your place. Either. There'll be a roll call when the chair announces it, and he said, and he'll give you or anyone else a roll call, and no one is going to take this chair, including you or anyone else. The clerk will call the roll on the appeal from the decision of the chair. And there'll be no outbreaks in the gallery, because if there is, the galleries will be cleared. This is a democratic body trying to conduct itself in a democratic way, and the young people particularly. I call your attention, men and women have a right to disagree. No one monopolizes the right of what is good or what is bad. Some people think everything is bad. But in the council, men get excited and women get excited, and they say things that they wouldn't want to do in any legislative body. But that doesn't mean that they're all bad, and that doesn't mean that all the action of your government is bad.
No, okay, Dan, let's take it away.
Hi, thanks a lot. Before I talk about this clip in particular, I just want to briefly discuss the Richard J. Daley collection here at UIC. And the important thing to remember is that Richard J. Daley had two roles, in many ways equally important. One was as mayor of Chicago from 1955 until his death in 1976. And the second role was as head of the Cook County Democratic Party, which gave him a lot of control over patronage jobs and what the party, and from there on, a lot of control over the people who represented the Democratic Party. And he held that position from 1954 until his death in 1976. And his collection represents basically those two roles. The two main series of that collection are divided into the mayoral or political papers and his and the more partisan papers there. Now, when we look at this this clip and next slide, please. When we look at the clip that we just listened to, we heard the voice of a couple of dissenters, a very small number of aldermen who were independent and who opposed Mayor Daley. And then we heard them spar a little with Alderman Holman, who was on more on the Daley side of the city council. And I see two themes in that clip. The first theme has to do with just the role of the dissenters and some of the challenges they may have faced in making their voices heard in city council. And the second theme has to do with the concerns raised by the first speaker, who was William Singer, who was concerned about the way, about transparency in the city council recordings. Not the recordings themselves, but in the journal proceedings that were made after the city council meetings. And he was saying that the language that was used in those proceedings was too vague, and that people who would read them would not get the full picture of what was happening. Now, I was not able to find pretty much any documentation in the Richard J. Daley collection about this particular council meeting or this particular dispute. But I did find an echo of it about 6 months later in this letter that you see here from November 1973. It's written by a professor from the University of Illinois Chicago. At that time was called University of Illinois Chicago Circle. And he was a political science professor named George Beam. And he's writing to the mayor, raising some concerns about something that had happened about a month before he wrote this letter. Several freshman aldermen were named to the finance committee of the city council, which is very unusual at that time. It was against the normal rules of order. And those freshman aldermen were people who were very much on the Daley side of things. And this professor is asking, well, he knows of one freshman Alderman Dick Simpson, who could have been just as good at being on the finance committee as anybody else. And he wants to know why this alderman was not actually appointed. Mr. Simpson was, along with Bill Singer and Leon Desprez, who you heard in the clips, he was one of the dissenting independent aldermen here. So that's one of the things we see, a concern by a citizen about the role of independent aldermen and having trouble getting their voice heard. But he's also, if you read the document a little closely, you'll see that he's also concerned that there was no discussion, or he doesn't know of any discussion that was had about who was appointed to this finance committee. And this is one small example of something that correlates roughly with the themes in this clip. You are going to see in the Richard J. Daley collection a lot of memoranda written to him, a lot of memoranda that were written on his behalf, and a lot of correspondence. But you don't always see the decisions that he makes. We see this letter. We see a couple of sentences that were underlined, probably by him. It's hard to tell. We don't know what he made of this letter. We don't know how he responded to that, at least not from looking at the collection itself. So that's just a brief tidbit that I found from the Richard J. Daley collection that helps exemplify this clip, and it underscores why it is so valuable to have these full recordings available for people to listen to, so it can help fill in some of these gaps. And that's it for the Daley clip.
Thanks, Dan. Morag is coming up next with the Harold Washington era. That's at CPL. So we're going to listen to an excerpt, and the speakers are Alderman Ed Smith, 28th Ward, and Alderman Danny K. Davis, 29th Ward. And again, very inelegantly. Toggling back.
Alderman Smith recognized. Mr. Chairman, last thing we want to do in this council is to do the same thing today that was done 2 or 3 years ago and draw these lines incorrectly. We want to make sure that all of our people, Hispanics, Blacks, the whole gamut, are represented properly. So that includes everybody. We just want to make sure that we set the example for the country, and that has not been the case for the years. We have to change that. The only way to change that is take some leadership to exemplify the kind of fairness that we know we ought to exemplify, and try to do things according to the law, the way the law is written, to make sure that everybody get their fair share.
Alderman Davis is recognized. Thank you, Mr. President. Stand that you really can't stop an idea whose time has come. And the time has actually come for the city of Chicago to be cut up from subdivisions. Particularly one thing. And that's all the original sympathy. That's all we're talking about. That's provide each of the to
I don't know if we're all having the same technical issues with the clip, but I can describe it. Unfortunately, I think there must have been something. Ellen, can I go ahead? Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. The clips are loud and clear.
Chicago is in fact the city of the big shoulders. City upon whose shoulders
let me just tell you what you heard, or describe what you heard, or were meant to hear. It was a clip featuring Alderman Ed Singer and Alderman Danny Davis, and the underlying topic is the battle to correct the ward map that was tossed out by the courts as being unfair to minority voters. The redrawn map led to special aldermanic elections in 1986, which saw Jesus Garcia and Luis Gutierrez win, and which ended the Verdoliak 29 block, essentially ending the council wars and allowing Harold Washington to get his appointees through and get his agenda moving. So unfortunately, we weren't able to hear that for the most part, but that was the gist of it. And Morag will tell us more about it from their collection.
Oh, hi, everybody. So I'm Morag Walsh from the Chicago Public Library Special Collections, where we do have the Harold Washington archives and collections. And I'm really sorry you didn't hear the clip of Danny Davis. He has the most velvet voice, and he just sounds better and better the older he gets. But the clip itself is really quite interesting. As Matt already explained a little bit, many of you will already know this. But when Harold Washington was elected in 1983, he did not have the support of the majority of the aldermen in the city council. Only 21 of 50 aldermen actually supported Harold Washington. The remaining 29 aldermen were led by Ed Verdoliak, and this bloc became known as the Verdoliak 29. They voted as a bloc to consistently prevent Harold Washington from passing any of his initiatives, from appointing any of his key personnel. It was an acrimonious situation that lasted for a couple of years, and the press dubbed this era council wars. If you really want to hear how badly these aldermen behaved, you really should listen to some of the audio that Matt has been able to digitize. You will be blown away by how poorly these so-called adults behave. It's absolutely shocking. However, the clip you almost heard marks an important turning point, because the debate that day was about the redrawing of the map that Chicago had redrawn in 1981. There's nothing new nowadays, and surprise, surprise, the map was tossed out by the court as being gerrymandered to ensure that certain aldermen retained their seats. Because the now illegal map was used for the 1983 election, the courts ordered that not only did Chicago have to redraw the map fairly, which this debate was about, they also had to hold special aldermanic elections in 1986 for the 7 wards that were directly affected by this gerrymander. If that's a word, I'm not sure that it is. Anyway, so Harold Washington then campaigned for the candidates who were running for these 7 wards, who were sympathetic to his agenda, who were progressive, and who were in line with his way of thinking. The significant result of the election was as Matt also said, the elections. Could you forward the slide, Ellen, please? Of Luis Gutierrez and Jesus Garcia, who, as we all know, went on to have very significant, prominent national roles as politicians, very well-respected politicians. Could you have the next slide, please, Ellen? Thank you. More importantly for Harold Washington in Chicago, however, the elections of Gutierrez and Garcia gave Harold Washington a majority in the council, and it did allow him to finally push his agenda forward and get things done. In addition to records such as these, the Harold Washington Archives and Collections is rich in documenting Harold Washington's policies and agendas with very key focuses. Every mayoral collection is going to be focused on economic development, and rightly so. The things that Harold Washington focused on were quite deep. We have a lot of information about the extension and the expansion of O'Hare Airport to expand Chicago's tax base. In the 1980s, Chicago was not nearly as prominent an airport as it is now. And this was a big deal for the city's coffers. Harold Washington also wanted to focus more of the attention on neighborhoods rather than the downtown and the shiny high-rise buildings. There were certain neighborhoods in Chicago that had never been improved or touched or the focus of any city dollars for a long, long time, and he wanted to address that imbalance. One of his biggest projects that was a raging success was the Chinatown Basin project. But there was also, he also revitalized the North Loop Theatre District and reopened the Chicago Theatre with city tax breaks. And the first act to actually appear when the Chicago Theatre reopened was Frank Sinatra. So a very cool opening act. In addition to the economic aspects of these records, one of the key events that happened in the mid-1980s, and you're probably all too young to remember this, but I remember all too well, was the eruption of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And it was a true crisis. I remember being terrified at the time. But cities had to figure out how to handle this from a public health point of view. There was not much information out there. The federal government, which was run by President Reagan, he had his Reaganomic policies going, and funding to democratic cities had been cut. A lot of social programs had been cut under the Reagan administration. So cities were getting less money from the federal government. And one of the things that these records show is that Chicago reached out to other major cities, San Francisco primarily, not surprisingly, New York, LA, Denver, Atlanta, to find out how these cities were coping with this incredibly scary disease. So if you're looking at public health records, the Harold Washington records are very, very rich. He was also very interested in reforming Chicago's public schools. There is quite a lot about a symposium that actually happened after his death in 1988, but the groundwork was laid during Harold Washington's administration. And this led to reforms in Chicago public schools, like the establishment of the local school councils and holding principals accountable to parents in a way that they have never been held before. These reforms are still enacted today. They're still how we run the schools. So they're very important, albeit a little dry topics, but there's good detail there. However, in my opinion, one of the most significant parts of the collections we have documents Harold Washington's efforts to bring people into government who historically have been excluded in the past. He campaigned on a platform for fairness, for openness, and for inclusion. And he followed through on this, in my opinion, but he founded commissions to bring certain groups of people into government. He founded a women's commission. He founded the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs. He founded an Asian American Affairs Commission. And he also had a commission on gay and lesbian issues. These commissions, and we have their papers and their annual reports and monthly reports, these commissions brought people to the table in city government for the first time. They were listened to and they were heard. And that is actually quite groundbreaking. So if you're looking at the extension of civil rights, if you like, the Harold Washington records are still very active. In addition to the papers, we have boatloads of photographs. Wherever Harold Washington went, he was followed by his press office photographers. We have tens of thousands of photographs of openings and, commencement speeches and things like that. And we are actually working to digitize the majority of these photographs through a Mellon grant that the library is being granted. And so we hope to have a lot of these photographs on our website free and clear to anyone who wants them soon. I'm not going to give you a timeline because, you never do that, but hopefully soon we'll have them. The gem I think that I think is often forgotten about with Harold Washington, though. However, you know how he died in 1987 in November, very suddenly. He was succeeded by Eugene Sawyer as acting mayor. Eugene Sawyer maintained Harold Washington's government structure. A lot of the personnel in the key positions, a lot of the senior cabinet members continued through Eugene Sawyer's administration, and he maintained Harold Washington's policies by and large. So we have Harold Washington's archives from 83 to 87 for the mayoral period, but we also have Eugene Sawyer's up until 1989 when Richard M. Daley was elected. So we really have a longer stretch of Washington kind of politics than is, initially obvious. If anybody would like to find out more about what's in the collection, please reach out to us directly. We'd be happy to navigate you through the collections. It's a gem of a collection. It's one of our most cherished, and it's one of our heaviest used collections too. So we're very proud of it. So please reach out and let us know what you need. We can help you. Over and out.
I'll just share that last slide of Jesus Garcia. It's, boy, seeing everyone so young. It's amazing. Oh my gosh, these are wonderful photos. Oh, Morag, this is such a wonderful collection. And I love to hear that it's so heavily used. Okay, Richard M. Daley, let's give this audio recording a go. And if we have issues, it just inspires you to go back and listen to it.
On behalf of the people of the city of Chicago, I'd like to thank Truck 15, Truck 11, ASL Engine 19, as well as these four individuals that truly represent the poise, the courage, the stamina, professionalism, and teamwork of the Chicago Fire Department. And every month we truly talk about the Chicago Fire Department in a way that represents not only these individuals, but right now someone's handling the call. And they could have went right and they could have called in and said, it's not our job, we're going to get the gas. And if they did that, all of you would be up screaming and yelling. They violated a rule. They should have went to the fire. Remember that. You would be up screaming and yelling if they said, we have to we're going to get gas. That's someone else's problem. But they didn't do it. Every day they do these things. And remember that. 99.9% of the firemen and their families are good, hardworking people. Yes, there's some negative, but let's not make the negative for your lawyers that you want to represent. Let's not make the negative for those that you're seeking to really destroy the fire department and the courage. And yes, we know lawyers want to make money off the city of Chicago in all their lawsuits. And you know that, and don't front for them. You represent the people. You do not represent lawyers. And remember that. These men don't represent lawyers. They're public servants, and they're doing their job. And that's why we're honoring them and all the men and women of the Chicago Fire Department. A day that you public servants represent the public first and never, ever lawyers. And I just want to salute these four individuals and remind you about a little history of the city of Chicago. I don't represent lawyers either. Thank you very much. You may laugh about that, but please, let's recognize these individuals. Alderman Fredwinkle, please. See that helmet? You would not have your husband at home. This is serious, not funny.
Oh, Dan, talk to us about Richard M. Daley.
Yeah, well, this clip actually, the context for this clip is it's a city council, an event at a city council meeting to honor some firefighters who apparently were on their way to get gasoline, but on the way they noticed a fire emergency and they jumped in and saved some lives. And this was an event, as often happened in city council. If you listen to a lot of the recordings the city clerk's office has, where city council honors firefighters or police officers or other public servants who go beyond the call of duty and save people. A lot of times those honoring events are a get together where everybody claps and applauds and praises them. But this time the mayor was chose to make a point about a current controversy involving the fire department. That's not obvious from the clip itself, but thanks to Matt, who did a little bit of research for me and got some newspaper articles from around the time, I learned that this was about charges or allegations of racial discrimination in the Chicago Fire Department, and particularly concerning the entrance exam they had instituted in 1995. Some people thought the exam was unfair, people who did not get a job, and as a result of these exams, and in the year 2000, they filed a lawsuit. And as of 2004, this lawsuit was still ongoing, which is what we hear about in the clip. Apparently, some aldermen had chosen to meet with plaintiffs' attorneys, and Mr. Daley considered this an action on their part to represent lawyers, as he put it. A short while later, after this meeting, the judge ruled that Chicago had been discriminatory in its hiring practices, and so the city had to create new practices here. Now, before I go into, if you please go to the next clip here. These are just some scenes from City Council very early in Mr. Daley's first term as mayor. But one thing I want to before I describe a little bit about the Daley collection to you, I should point out that the themes of the fire department controversy, as well as some of what we see here on the hearing on minority set-asides for city contracts, and that is what Morag, my colleague or my counterpart at CPL, mentioned, is one of Harold Washington's emphases on fairness, openness, and inclusion. Part of Mayor Richard M. Daley's approach to politics was to try to satisfy the contingent, at least some members of the constituency that had voted for Harold Washington, and to try to gain their support. And part of how he did that, or tried to do that, was to address a current court controversy in 1989 about minority set-asides, and he took it upon himself to try to promote minority set-asides in city council. That image on your left is an image of him doing that here. But to go back to the Richard M. Daley papers itself, I should say they're different from his father's. If you look at his father's papers, they are the papers of basically his two roles, and they're basically papers about his father, memoranda written to his father, or letters written to him. The Richard M. Daley papers, on the other hand, are probably more accurately to be regarded as the papers of the mayor's office. The series in that collection are organized according to the city unit or the staff person who worked for the mayor or who reported to the mayor. So we see more of what the mayor's office is doing, and less of what the mayor himself is doing as somebody who is running the show. He's still there in the background, but these are very much the papers of the mayor's office. And possibly for that reason, we have a lot more documentation about the things that are discussed in this city council clip than we did for the Richard J. Daley clip that we heard with the dissenting alderman. Next slide, please. And I'll just go through these very quick. I had to pick and choose because we had a lot of documentation about the fire department problem, but here is a letter from Reverend Jesse Jackson outlining concerns in 1997 about unfairness in the Chicago Fire Department. This is actually a copy of a letter that had been sent to the mayor's correspondence unit, and this goes into the mayor's executive office files. That's important because it shows that he's not getting the firsthand version of the document like his father would have. He's getting a copy that was sent to his correspondence unit that forwarded him the copy. But going back into 1997, we see this letter from Reverend Jackson. Next slide, please. And then here we have some talking points for a new fire commissioner who was named in 1999. His name was James Joyce. I'm not sure if that's a relation to the to the novelist or not, but here are some talking points that Mr. Joyce was working on with the press office about how to respond to allegations of in the fire department of there being misbehavior by some firemen, but also problems of discrimination, hiring irregularities, and other concerns. Next slide, please. And here we have two items. One on the left is a photograph from the mayor's press office where the mayor is announcing James Joyce's replacement a few weeks later after the clip you just heard, Cortez Trotter. One of the concerns about Mr. Joyce was that he had not successfully addressed a lot of the concerns that came with the fire department. To your right, we see a letter sent to the mayor via the correspondence unit, and this is a letter from the a letter from the Don McNee Fire School Incorporated in Cleveland, Ohio, offering the city. This is after the court had ruled that Chicago had violated fair employment practices, and this is a school in Ohio that offers instruction for firefighters and offering to help out probably for a fee to help the city develop a new hiring system. So that's something else. The correspondence unit also has a lot of letters from disaffected people who applied for the firefighter's job and did not get it. I did not include those here, but so that's a sample of a little bit of what's in the Richard M. Daley papers that have to do with this clip. And again, it shows how our collections can help supplement the very fine contributions that the city clerk's office has made in terms of making these council hearings available.
Thanks, Dan. Boy, the audio of Richard M. Daley, his voice comes back so clearly. He's unmistakable. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, who has put together this wonderful guide.
Thank you. So one of the themes that we've had in a couple of these webinars about Chicago's municipal archives is the reason that Chicago Collections Consortium and Chicago Area Archivists have done webinars on that subject in the past is because they're so spread out. They're difficult to research or at least to know where to find the records to research are. And there have been in the past some really excellent library guides that local librarians, university librarians at Northeastern have created to give people like a primer on how to research Chicago's records. But I wanted to create a guide that had as much granular level detail as possible. And so this year we put this guide up. And so what you can find in it is, among other things, a listing of all the collections of aldermanic papers, departmental papers, mayoral papers that you could find around the city. And the libraries that have them include the Newberry, the Chicago History Museum Research Center, UIC Special Collections, Chicago Public Library Special Collections, Office of the City Clerk, our archival resources page. So there's a lot of information contained in this, and what we hope is that it can serve as a kind of virtual map to what's out there. And certainly there will be things added to it as we have new things to link to it. But I hope that if people are interested in seeing what they can find and where it's located, that they'll take a look at this and find it useful. And I would just add that because Chicago's municipal records can be really complex, we're going to see some additional slides from the IRAD facility at Northeastern Illinois University. A lot of the Chicago City Clerk's records from before 1946 are housed in the IRAD collection at Northeastern. So that said, oh, and then the other thing I wanted to add is that we have an archival resources page on the city clerk site now, which is one of the links under city council records on this guide. We are adding newly digitized materials. I can announce today that we have a plan to get the missing journals from 1963 to 1981 digitized in the next few months and online. So that'll be a really big help. There was this gap between 63 and 81 where you can't find the journals online. We also have uploaded lots of the indexes to the Journal of Proceedings, which should make researching legislative history a lot easier. So we're looking to improve what's available and for all of us who work with these collections to kind of pool our resources more. And so this webinar today and this guide are hopefully, I think good steps in that direction. And if you have any questions, please get in touch. You can contact us through the city clerk's archives page.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to take us briefly through the IRAD slides. Michael Hall, who works for the Illinois State, they can't be filmed, so he's very generously shared his slides. And they will be available as part of the presentation. So genealogy research in IRAD, and again, as Matt noted, this is at Northeastern Illinois University. And IRAD, if you're familiar with it, separates the state by region. So Northeastern existed since 1990, and again, only Cook County, which is important. Many of the records go back as far as the 19th century, and then Chicago Film Review Board, police files, Human Relations Commission investigation files. It's a really rich resource. I'm always glad to be reminded it exists. Just a new preview of what you can see there. And their county listing. I've seen this online. This is very helpful. It's just so much wonderful information. Exactly. Non-circulating must be used in the respective depository. You can visit in person or make mail or telephone research requests. And contact information. And again, these slides will be shared. So when I skim through them, you're going to be able to go back to them. And there's a website. And I'm just going to go back and pause on that. And wonderfully, we've got time for questions, which we wanted to make sure we had because we have, whoops, let me go back. Because I've got a very good question here. See if we can answer this one. It's always puzzled me. It sounds like other cities have more centralized archives. Can you give an example of one of those cities? Can you give some insight into why one exists there and not in Chicago? Such a good question. Anyone on our panel?
I can offer a little about this. Cities with centralized archives, like New York City has a municipal archives, Milwaukee has a municipal archives, Dallas has a municipal archives. Plenty of cities do. Cities bigger than Chicago, smaller than Chicago. As to why Chicago doesn't, there are possible reasons that have to do with perhaps in the past there was a concerted effort to limit the public's accessibility, having these records accessible to the public. If you know anything about Chicago's municipal records and how to access them, you might have heard of the Municipal Reference Library, which used to be on the 9th or 10th floor of City Hall. People talk about that as an extraordinary resource. Luckily, even though the center closed, the collection was moved to Chicago Public Library, where it's still accessible at Harold Washington Library. Yeah, I do know that I believe it was Harold Washington who, in his efforts to make government more responsive and more accessible to the city of Chicago, I believe it was actually, I shouldn't say this if I'm not certain. But it's possible that he was the one who allowed the state archives to take the records that became the IRAD collection at Northeastern. So because before that they weren't available to the public at all. So
it's really stymied researchers for ages, I know. We welcome more questions in the Q&A portion. I will share, when I attended the launch in February of the City Council Audio Archives, one of the panelists was former Alderwoman Helen Schiller. And we had listened to, and Matt will remember better than I could, but we listened to a clip that was critical of Richard J. Daley. And Helen Schiller commented that we were lucky to have that clip because he didn't always have the mic on for people he didn't want to hear from. So I thought that was really telling, both and in a way that the City Council Audio Archives really are history. They're history preserved. Here's a wonderful question. Any plans for transcriptions of the recording?
So that's a good question. What we do have are text files for every recording. If you go to the individual item record pages on the Internet Archive for each recording, there will be a file on the right side. I think it just says text. It is auto-generated, but in my experience using it's pretty good. Some of the names can be misspelled, but for the most part, it's really good as a quick way to search what was said in the meetings.
Another question, do all audio recordings of City Council meetings include captions?
Kind of going along with the last question, we have text files for them. So yeah, it's a auto-generated captioning basically. But it isn't 100% accurate, but it's honestly pretty good. So.
One of the things I also think is so wonderful about all of our collections is the way they complement each other. So for Morag to talk about Harold Washington and his efforts towards civil rights, and to note that Richard M. Daley, in his own way, did try to continue that. I just really love that about city history, is the continuation. If anyone attended our presentation back in February with Dominic Pasiga on his book Clout City, one of the questions that Dominic had at the end was, are we ever going to have sort of mayoral dynasties again? Or are we just kind of one and done terms? And Dominic noted, we're kind of one and done right now. That's where we're going. We're not going to have these dailies again, which is fascinating. And I'm so grateful for our members for having these wonderful collections. And Dan, I really appreciated the difference between the Richard J. Daley collection and the Richard M. Daley collection that you noted. I think that's good to know for anyone planning to do research. Any other questions that we have, or any comments that our panelists want to make about their collections?
If I could jump in, I did want to just add that in addition to the Harold Washington mayoral records, we do have his records from his entire political career. In 1965, he went to Springfield as a representative, and we have his papers from then. He then moved into the Illinois Senate, and we have his records from there. And then he moved to be a US congressman in 1980, and we have his records from that as well. So we really have, if you're looking for his political career, you can go from 1965 through his death in 1987. So it really is quite a wonderful collection. I would say that the mayoral records get more attention than the pre-mayoral records, which I understand. But there's good stuff in the pre-mayorals too. There really is.
Maybe somebody's dissertation topic.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump. Oh, sorry, Ellen. I'd like to jump in and just add that in addition to the mayoral papers, we have a lot of aldermanic papers. One of which is Helen Schiller's papers that Matt, or that you mentioned her a few minutes ago, and her career as an alderperson pretty much spans that of Richard M. Daley, and she was pretty much a counterpoint and a critic to him. So we're fortunate to have both Richard M. Daley papers and this counterpoint as well.
Definitely.
And you, Dan, you have Dick Simpson's papers coming in as well.
That's
Correct?
They have not been processed yet, so and it may take a while because it's a very huge collection. So it might be a while.
I would just add that there are so many resources. If you just have to know where to look, and hopefully we're bridging that gap a little bit by making it easier to find them. So
definitely. And in the Q&A, Michelle McCoy has put in a URL for Harold Washington. shypublib.org/Harold-Washington will get you to those collections, which is excellent. One of the things I loved about the first discussion that you had, Dan, with the Richard J. Daley papers was Dick Simpson being brought up in 1973. And we still see Dick Simpson today. I mean, that's the thing about Chicago, is just people stay around, which is awesome. Okay, we are at 12:59. I would thank everyone for spending their lunch with us. This is recorded and will be sent out, and hopefully all the audio will work when you see the slides. But I so appreciate everyone taking this leap with us about doing audio in a webinar. I think we were 85% successful with that, and that's good. And it encourages you to listen to the rest of it. So I really want to thank Matt Messbarger, Dan Harper, Morag Walsh, and Gretchen Neidhardt, Chicago Area Archivist, for co-sponsoring, and Clerk Anna Valencia for sharing Matt and his expertise with us. I think the audio archives, I have been fascinated with them ever since I started hearing them when they were launched in February. I urge you all to do the same and to join us at another program. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.